Hey guys, and welcome back to a brand new podcast. It's the Table Talk. Hope you guys are having a great week because it's Monday. Or whatever day you're listening to.
They've probably just had a few hours of a great week at this point whenever you're listening.
We just hope your week is great, to be honest. Unless you're not looking forward to your week.
Oh,
that's what we're talking to you about today.
Then we have questions why you aren't looking forward to the week.
That's right.
Today we have a very special guest.
Ooh.
I used to look up to this guy whether to fail or pass my grades.
Not anymore.
I still look up, but not for my grades anymore.
Yes,
so, yeah. Dr. Goh, would you introduce yourself?
Hi. Yes, I am MingH's former lecturer, but I don't take responsibility for him at all.
Lecturer is a very humble title. He was the Dean of Psychology when I was in psychology.
Wow.
And today he's here. What do you do now, Dr. Goh?
So I'm actually the CEO of the Paramount Education K-12 group. So we oversee international private schools to real education group, Sri KDU, kindergarten, stuff like that. But of course, when MingH, when you were first with us, I was in help the psychology department there, where I was for 20 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I've been teaching and practicing as a psychologist for the past 22 years now.
Oh my Lord.
And but in education all the while. So one of the things I did do was go into companies and I got called into a lot of organizations to look at their work culture, issues like stress, motivation, high turnover rate, low engagement rate, when staff are not satisfied, conflicts, stuff like that.
Love it. Yeah, because that's what we're going to be talking about today.
That's good.
I just want to say this. Just want to quickly say, I think Dr. Goh is perhaps the smartest person who has been into this studio.
I doubt that.
Currently, yes.
I think,
I think that's a terrible reflection of the people you've been having in this studio, right?
Fun fact, Dr. Goh knows our dad.
If that's true.
Dr. Goh knows our dad. How do you know our dad again? Oh boy.
Do you really want to get into that?
Okay, let's say that for another day when my dad is on set as well.
Their dads, were really looked after me when I was younger, right?
Oh no.
Played football with me.
Oh boy. Yeah, let's save that for another
What
day.
a throwback.
Absolutely.
Okay, so why we're doing this today is because I think we've received continuously, personally and through the show, through the team, we receive a lot of comments and questions from time to time that have to do with the well-being of your life, mental health and the likes. And I've always stayed away from these questions because as a responsible psychology graduate, you don't answer these questions with authority unless you do the research or unless you have someone credible for the answers that you give. And I thought, like, who else can be more credible than the Dean of Psychology himself? So that's why you're here today. But we aren't. To be here. Yeah, we're not going to go too deep into like this holistically, change your life kind of questions.
Sure.
But we're going to be talking about what you just said you do.
Sure.
We're going to be talking about everything we can that has to do with mental health in the workplace. Because we don't have to just define workplace as office workspaces. We can also define them as if you're in college and, in your class, working with team members and assignments. But we've gotten quite a bunch of questions around the topic. Okay. And we kind of we previously did an episode where we just did a quick fire through as many questions as we can. Sure. So instead of focusing on one specific topic, we're just going to try our best.
Sure. Sounds like fun. Let's do it.
All right. So like you said, usually when you go into an office, you are hired to at least assess the situation there. What is something that usually stands out as like a red flag? Like the most common one.
Well, I think when staff turnover rate is high, a lot of staff are leaving an organization, and they're not staying for long periods of time. Usually, that's a red flag. That tells me that something is not quite right with the organizational culture. Then, of course, there are other red flags as well. Things like people are not performing very well. Right. So if the organization itself, usually, look, guys, I get called in when an organization is going through challenges and their performance is below par. So obviously, if the organization is doing very well, typically I don't get called in. So when the performance is very poor in an organization, I'm brought in to assess it from a psychological perspective to see what is the reason for low performance. So is it because people are not happy, stuff like that.
Usually when you get called in when people leave too much, right?
Yes.
What does it mean when people don't want to leave? Like we try and push them out so they don't want to go home, kind of thing.
That's a nice problem to have.
Okay, no. Moving on from that. All right. So maybe a great way to start out would be a very common question in life nowadays. A lot of questions revolve around toxicity in the workplace.
Sure.
All right. And I think a lot of people have a lot of definitions for this because some people just need to disagree with a colleague and they're like, oh my gosh, toxic, not good for me.
Yeah.
What is okay, you guys are hearing this now and here. Let this be your baseline measurement, okay?
Correct.
What is a quote unquote proper definition for a toxic workplace or a toxic culture?
I mean, I think that's a really good question because the reality is that toxicity in a workplace culture is a very, very, it's a soft, subjective thing, and often it's due to people's perceptions, so I would say that a lot of times when I've gone in and people say, look, my workplace is toxic, I can't stand it, everybody, this person is toxic. Then often when we go in and investigate and we actually, dig a bit deeper,
it's that person itself, right?
Sometimes it could be, but I was going to I was going to say, when you talk to 5 different people in that same work team or organization, hey, not everybody agrees with the fact that it's toxic.
Revelation number 1, listeners. So you're telling me that toxic isn't a workplace, it's a mindset,
it's a state of mind,
it's a perspective.
I think potentially it can be. Now, having said that, I mean, there are features of
a toxic workplace.
I mean, a toxic workplace or negative workplace. So whether it's defined by conflict, lots of perpetual conflict, unhealthy office politics, a lot of destructive behavior, sabotaging behavior,
that is outright toxic.
Absolutely. So there are workplace, environments where it's not so subjective because you go in there and it's very clear. You talk to everybody and everybody agrees with the fact that there is a negative, destructive environment at play. And people are out there to sort of get each other. People are sabotaging each other. People are out there to sort of destroy each other's careers. But I think, look, that's very rare, and a lot of times, a lot of organizations, when you go in and people use the word toxic, in my mind, that's probably overstated. The fact that
it's a dramatic person,
well, I mean, I think it's overstated. A lot of times, I mean, of course, there's conflict. There's going to be some disagreement. There's always office politics. I mean, there's no organization in the world that doesn't have any office politics. So I think, I think it's just about managing expectations that a lot of people maybe go into a workplace environment expecting it to be perfect. Expecting everybody to get along and we all hold hands and sort of sing Kumbaya every day.
I feel like that
kind of thing. But that's not realistic.
Correct. Which is also, I mean, just to kind of like chime in, that's like I feel like the perfect workplace is a expectation of a lot of our generation. Especially the new generation.
You walk
those that are actually about to enter the workplace, right? They want a high salary, the perfect condition, no stress. And I feel like that in itself, the expectation sets them up for the biggest fall ever when it does happen.
I think you're right. I think you're right that, I mean, look, we work in a age and generation now where there's greater visibility in terms of workplaces. So I guess that's what makes our, this generation different from, let's say, 50 years ago, 70 years ago. I mean, your grandparents, parents' generation, where there was, I mean, basically they only knew 2-3 jobs. And you didn't have the internet, you didn't have movies and podcasts and YouTube videos about, the 100 other companies out there. And of course, all of the companies are emphasizing only their positive traits. Everybody talks about the fact that they're an empowering organization,
open workspace,
progressive, open workspace.
No hierarchy.
Everybody wants to work in a Google,
free
Amazon
buffet.
until you're actually there. And then you realize that there is no perfect organization. So I think you're right. I think the younger generation needs to maybe go in with more realistic expectations about what a workplace is. I mean, we always say in psychology that, look, people are people. And wherever you have people that are imperfect, that we have our moods, we have our ups and downs, we have our emotions, we have our stresses, we have all of these imperfections. And you put 5 of us, 10 of us, 20 of us, 50 of us in the same organization.
You're multiplying the imperfections.
Obviously, exactly. You're going to have issues. And to me, that's part of working in an organization. So the only way to avoid all of that is you open up your own, company by yourself in the basement somewhere with nobody else. And you don't hire any staff. And that's the only way where, you're not exposed to this.
Even if you hire a guard dog to work with you, one day the guard dog's just gonna feel off and then like, wow, toxic environment, guard dog,
Absolutely.
I mean, just basically just get your tissues for your issues, man.
Well, okay, I think, wow, this literally links straight next to the next topic. But okay, before we move on, just we give the audience the benefit of the doubt. We give them the benefit of the doubt that no, it's not an expectation, but they are in an environment as such.
Yep.
How do you usually deal with environments like this? If it's an environment or if it's an identified few people in the workplace?
So look, I think if people find themselves in a really negative environment, like, I'm avoiding using the term toxic because, like I said, that's really subjective.
See, guys, that's a that's a
what a
proper
learned,
practice.
What a learned individual, guys.
That's a very proper practice.
Careful.
Yeah, you're very careful with terms.
So if you're in an environment where you're very unhappy, I'm very unhappy, and I think it's very destructive. I'm having trouble engaging with other personalities in there. I feel that people are being cruel to me, or I think there are a couple of things that we can do. I think number one is to realize that I'm there by choice.
Yeah.
Which means that
you can leave by choice.
I can leave. Exactly. So I think
that's right.
There are very few circumstances in today's environment where people are really trapped in a single work environment.
Yeah.
They have an option, and I think that's liberating to remember that I wake up, and if I really am so unhappy where I am, I have the freedom to actually go. I mean, you're talking about there are thousands of companies out there, so I can switch. I think number two, we always talk about understanding being the first step, meaning if you've got a boss or a peer or a colleague that is really giving you trouble and problems, and there are people like that, that lots of tension, a lot of stress.
Speed them up.
I think well, step number one, all right. Step number one is to understand. I mean, so why? I mean, human beings are human beings. There are reasons why they're so angry or bitter, or why are they shouting all the time? Why are they upset all the time? Why are they? Is it because they're under stress, under pressure? Because they've been maybe mentored to lead in that particular way. That's the way they react. So why aren't they trusting me? Maybe because they've had an experience in the past before. I mean, so it's similar to relationships as well in general. I mean, we always say in relationships, when you've got somebody who is, whether they're too jealous or too protective or too angry, oftentimes it's about understanding where that comes from. And often it's because of something in the past. So I think same thing in the work environment. And I think that's freeing as well. So there are many instances where we've helped people, and when they understand their bosses better, they understand their peers, their colleagues, or their staff better, I think that's the first step to humanizing them. So rather than seeing this person as a problem, you're seeing them as a human being. So whether you choose to stay or leave the organization, at least then this becomes a human problem. I mean, the world is not divided into good and evil people. I think that's for comic books and movies.
We always try to tell people that it's everyone's still a human at the end of the day. Everyone's trying to get a job done at the end of the day. It's just whether you have the liberty to connect with the human or not. And I think I think more often than not, if a problem is a manager or someone above you, I think maybe your choice is to just get out. Not many times you can go to your manager and say like, hey, I think you got attitude problem. We need to talk about it. Like.
Well, I mean, psychology. If you remember, MingH, if you remember,
if I remember, oh my God,
we talked a lot about locus of control, right?
Correct.
So we say that people should have a healthy locus of control that we should identify in any situation, including a work environment, what you're in control of and what you're not in control of. So in this situation, you may say, I can't control my boss. I mean, I can't control the fact that he or she is unhappy with me or shouting at me, or their management style is different. But what I can control is how I relate to them, how I communicate to them, how I understand them better, understand their patterns better. So I think that's sort of that's the approach, Focus on what you can do.
I'm glad, because I've actually used this term before, and people have heard me talk about the locus of control. Oh, great. We have an interesting twist to our episode today. We have an audience sitting at the side here.
Hi, friends.
So, from time to time, we're going to look over the audience and say, like, you guys have any questions about toxic relationships? Workplaces.
Or relationships, up to you.
We're going to count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow.
We'll come back again later.
We'll come back to you guys in a bit. Okay. Moving forward from this.
Is it because these are the toxic people
in the relationship?
Actually. Bingo, is it?
They have no
you want me to ask them to leave the room while I field your questions?
They have no say in this.
Well.
So, we start the day usually with a public beating.
Beating.
I believe that's the only way to start the day.
I found the first toxic organization.
Oh my gosh. Okay. We will go on with that, because I like the way you angled the topic, because sometimes it's not a general thing that you go into a place and you feel it's toxic because of an expectation or a perception. And I feel that really ties in with the next topic we're going to talk about regarding what is going on in workplaces now. We see articles about it all the time. We see employers complain about it all the time. I'm talking about the entitled millennial fresh grads going into organizations.
So I don't think it's actually millennials, right? They're probably like
whatever these new
Gen
people like
Zs.
Gen iPhones, you know,
right?
So we're talking about the fact that because you use the word expectation, we're finding more and more people, which this will link into the next part, finding more and more people just going in with a very big sense of entitlement, being able to tell the employer, like, I want this, and then there's going to be obviously there's going to be unhappiness, right? Then it's going to spin off one day into like people complaining, oh, we got a very toxic environment. Maybe this one goes out to the people, I mean, for you guys who are listening and thinking about applying for a job, what are the effective, healthy steps immediately from that get-go when you approach a job? I mean, you can talk about from both ways, the employer or the employee.
And I think that's the best way to do it. So I think in any kind of conflict situation or situation where we are having tension with somebody else, it's important to see things from two perspectives. So maybe I'll answer it from this, in this way. I think from the employer's perspective, there needs to be a realization, and many, of course, bosses tend to be, whether it's Gen Ys, if they are a bit younger, or Gen Xs. I think the majority of them are Gen Xs and baby boomers. And they need to realize that obviously the culture has changed, So I think, speaking as a Gen Xer myself, I mean, often when we talk to CEOs or business leaders, we say, look, I mean, like it or not, you need to accept that the younger generation have different expectations.
Different needs.
And if you want to attract the best talents and the best minds, then look, the workplaces can't resemble that of the 1960s or 70s or 80s. So I think from their perspective, they need to also, affect a shift, right? So they can't be running it like 20, 30 years ago, the way they communicate to staff, the kind of benefits they offer, the kind of environment, communication, decision-making processes will need to be more egalitarian, more open. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. So that's not about removing the challenge and the toughness in the workplace, but it's about saying, look, the way we communicate and the way we work together might be a bit different. I think from the other perspective, I think, MingH, as you pointed out, the employee coming in also then needs to meet the employer halfway and to say, okay, look, the workplace is certainly not university or school. And especially, I think millennials that have come from schools or universities that have been very protected environments, where I mean, everybody's just nice to one another, and lecturers and teachers don't really maybe scold you or rebuke you or give you I mean, I think very upfront kind of feedback. Everything's very positive and very gentle. Then obviously coming to a work environment can be a rude shock, because suddenly you're in an environment where every week, every month, it's about survival of the fittest. It's about meeting timelines, deadlines, financial targets. If not, the whole company goes bankrupt. And I think in a global environment, I don't know whether, I mean, you took my industrial psych class, and if you remember the introduction to that, I did talk about the fact that, I mean, the world has become such a competitive place when it comes to business. The majority, I mean, 70-80% of businesses go bankrupt within the first 1 or 2 years. So literally, you're talking about everybody is just fighting to survive. And so I think the new employee coming into a workplace environment needs to immediately grasp the gravity of that, that you're no longer in an environment where, hey, look, if you fail and nobody meets targets, it's okay, you get a C- and you do the next semester. I mean, it's not university anymore. I mean, you fail, people lose money, the company may go bankrupt. And 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 people may lose their jobs. So, I mean, you've got to understand why people are in a high stress environment. It's not stress for the fun of it. It's stress because it's tough. Business is tough. To keep a business afloat is tough. So I think if the new employee joining the organization understands the urgency and understands the fact that, things will be challenging, and it's not Disneyland, I mean, it's not joining an amusement park, and it's not going to be fun every day.
It's called work for a reason.
Absolutely.
You're interviewing for a job, not for a playtime, fun time kind of thing. But it sounds ridiculous, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think just to kind of like touch on the point that you brought up, how I guess a new generation or just sometimes employees or new employees are not in the mindset to understand the stresses that a employer has for running a business. And I think there's a trend in today's generation of people and young people that everyone wants to be their own boss.
Sure.
Right, everyone's jumping off from the corporate world. Everyone's jumping off from their 9 to 5 to become the boss of their own company, right? Which is not wrong, because I mean, in that sense, we're
It's
also
nice
doing
to,
that, right?
It's nice to think about it.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
But I think there's I also feel like I really feel like today's conversation kind of like boils back to expectations, right?
Sure.
Like you don't like your responsibilities and set of rules and works that you have to do in your office space. You feel like, I don't know what, I can be my own boss, I can do better. And you come out and then you open up your own business and you realize that
it's tough, man.
It's really tough, right? Yeah.
And again, I think there are a lot of issues here, and it's important that, we don't confuse them. On one hand, I think the generational effect, so you're talking about millennials, Gen Ys and Gen Zs, they're obviously coming into a work environment with a very different context. So they are in a fourth industrial revolution context. They are in a context where things are faster, where, things like I say are more egalitarian, meaning they are more assertive, which look, all of these things are not bad things, So the speed of which they expect things, the speed in which they expect to finish work. I mean, they are used to a lot faster cycles than the Gen X's or baby boomers. I think the idea that they are a bit more assertive, maybe a bit more upfront, a bit more forward with, hey, look, this is what I like, and I want to communicate that clearly. I'd rather not tai chi around for 3-4 months. If I want something, I want it. My point is, these are not necessarily bad things if managed well in a work environment. Now that's different from, I think, the entitled youth that comes in and says, look, where's my corner office, and how come my car park isn't next to the building, and why am I earning 5,000 ringgit from the get-go, and I want this and I want that, and I think these are two different things. So I think, like I say, there are some good effects of the new millennials, because my point is they are speeding up the work environment in a good way. I mean, all of these huge tech companies, the large movers, shakers in the Fortune 500s, a lot of their momentum comes because the new millennials are coming in like a blood transplant, and they're saying, hey, look, we want this and we want things faster, and they are improving the work environment, right? They are improving the work cycle. On the other hand, I think there are some elements, and look, it's not everybody. Look, I mean, oftentimes, I think what two of you are talking about, you're not talking about, the people from impoverished backgrounds that are still born today, that are still hungry, like your parents' generation, still unfussy, still willing to work for nothing, work long hours. I think what two of you are talking about are maybe the upper middle income class of people who are coming in and they're saying, look, maybe my parents have spoiled me and I've got everything I wanted ever, and therefore now I'm in a work environment and I'm wondering, why aren't I getting everything I want? So I agree. I think that's a legitimate concern, and so I think my message to them is to say, look, you need to grow up. You need to suck it up. This is work. You're an adult now, and it's not just work. This is life. You need to realize that in the real world, you're not going to get everything you want immediately. A lot of things you need to fight for, and a lot of things after even you fight for, you're not going to get everything.
True.
And so I think it's about growing up and the reality of the real world. But like I say, that doesn't mean, this is not an anti-Gen Y, Gen Z message. This is about saying, if you are spoiled or protected, it's about growing up.
No, I think, but these expectations are good to set, because I think a lot of, we're not going to talk about it today. I think a lot of basically depression, a lot of disappointment and frustration, they all stem from having very high expectations, like you said, very high entitled expectations of work. And if you don't deal with that, and if you don't come to terms with yourself, like, you might not get what you're working for. And because if everyone goes in and gets whatever they want, what is this world actually? It's not. That's an ideal world. But if you go in with the expectation of saying that, what, I'm just going to do the work, and I'm going to do the work well. I think that immediately shifts the focus of like, I want to do the work and I want to get paid well. That expectation.
And the idea that all of these are what two of you are talking about. These are good work ethic and values.
There you go.
And they are a whole bunch of them. So you've talked about the value of hard work, the idea that things don't come easy, that some of the most worthwhile things in life,
Right.
whether it's projects, whether it's starting a company, whether it's completing a movie project or whatever it is, these things are hard, and you do them because they're hard, not because they're easy.
I like the fact that you brought that up because I think I don't know what it is, the last part of it, but I would like to spend a bit more time on this. We're talking about the fact that people nowadays go in with expectations, wanting, we talked about it earlier, happy every day, feel the passion, I love this kind of thing, and you termed it the work-life satisfaction. We talked about this before the podcast started, right? I think there are realistic entitlements and as opposed to unrealistic entitlements. But let's wrap this part up with saying that whole another big question we get. How do I know this is my passion?
Sure.
Okay, to me, just to set the baseline right, I think because we've been very, very blessed, we've had the chance to pursue this quote unquote passion. The realistic story to this is we never knew it was a passion until it kind of like really worked out. And I guess the emotions built onto it, the skill and the craft and the amount of work we put into it built on it. But we also get, because of what we do, a lot of people ask, how do you know if you're finding your passion? And I think it's more often than not linked very wrongly into workplace satisfaction, because there is an assumption that you have to be passionate about your job. Then again, I'm not saying that this is wrong or right, but there is an assumption where you have to be passionate about what you do, or you're just going to be working mindlessly. Again, it's how the question is angled. But there's a very big saying. If you, I really don't like this saying, but it's a saying, if you don't build your own castle, you're going to help someone else build their castle.
And what's wrong with that?
And I've always, even at the risk of it, because we're building our own castle over here, can you imagine a world where every one castle just has one person in it? You know? Can you imagine how ridiculous that picture would look?
And I think that comes down to, again, I mean, that's a slightly different question, but that's the fallacy of ownership equals happiness.
Yeah.
The fallacy that if I don't own it, if it's not mine, if it's not under my bank account, I can't enjoy it. And I mean, you think about it, I mean, we travel the whole world. You go to Rome, you go to Paris, you go to all these beautiful places. You don't own any of it, but yet we take so much joy and pleasure from just being there and sharing the experience. So but coming back to the idea of happiness and passion. So often, when I was lecturing in university, I used to give students sort of this rule of thumb and say, look, when you're going out for jobs, it's the 60-40 rule, right? So I said, look, if 60% of the time in your job, whatever it is you're doing, you have this level of satisfaction or meaning or contentment because you feel you're doing something that fits your strengths, your talents, as well as your interests. So there are two things, talents and interests. And so we say 60% of the time, if what you're doing in your job fits that, that's really good. I mean, you should stay. That job is a keeper. You should be so happy. All right,
60% is just a little bit more than half the time.
Yeah. So,
a little bit more.
In fact, 50-50 is already very good, because look, I mean, the majority of the world's population, I mean, maybe they are in their 20s or 30s or maybe even zero. So I would say 60% of the time, if you're doing something that you really like and enjoy and it fits your strengths and talents, then great. And 40%, the expectation needs to be that 40% of your job is not going to be that fun. So for example, a lot of teachers, they enjoy being with their students, they enjoy teaching, but they don't enjoy marking and preparation. So
during the holidays,
that's 40% of the admin work. But I mean, you could just have to suck it up and push through it. So I would say most jobs are like that, and I think that's an example. I mean, when you mentioned MingH earlier about that's an example of a realistic expectation. So I mean, if you're going in there and you're thinking, look, 99% of the time, my expectation is I want to be doing stuff that is fun, then to me, look, it's not that it's impossible, but chances are high you're going to be disappointed with most of the jobs you're working in. So I think 60-40, that's great. Anything beyond that 70-30, then hey, that you're already exceptional. And 50-50, that would be about, I would say, the average.
No, you're right. You're right. Because we live in a time and era where, like you said, there's a lot of transparency across everything right now. You get, like, with a click of a button, you get a look into this company, you get a look into that company. But more often than not, people like to publicize successes, to publicize things going
It's the
right.
Facebook phenomenon.
Yeah,
right?
and if you really wanted to, I want to just put an exaggerated estimate, right? 100% of the time, you're seeing 100% of happiness online, and that gets
Instagram, Facebook, because they're only posting positive things.
yeah. And I mean, technically, if you want to post yourself crying on Instagram, I have more questions for you than answers, to be honest. But I think that expectation then moves into that whole 60-40 rule where you're not going to be fulfilled and passionate every day of the week or month or year.
Good days, bad days.
Yeah, there has to be. There has to be some part of it where it feels like work.
Yeah.
And I mean, on that point itself, why do you think, side question, our parents' generation, like even like my dad or his dad, we just went through a whole
Not
topic.
that he was unhappy all the time.
I mean, no, exactly. Not right.
But I understand your point.
You get what I mean?
I get your point.
I remember talking to a friend about this, and this friend changed 3 jobs in the span of 3 months.
Okay.
You know, and if you think about it, like back in our parents' generation, right?
You live and die in a job, man.
Yeah, I've never really heard much about like, you know what, I'm not happy with this place, I want to move on to greener pastures. They would stick to one job and do it well. What has happened? What do you think has happened to, like, you know, tip that scale into this paradigm that we live in now?
I think the difference is their options, like, you know. So again, I think we need to be fair. I think I think
we're more aware of the options now.
It's good that we look up to our grandparents and our parents, and the fact that their work ethic was different. You know, the fact that they persevered with jobs a lot. I mean, you're talking about the fact that their forbearance with stress and unhappiness was maybe a lot higher than we have. And I think so. It's right that we praise them, but at the same time, we have to understand they were living in a context where there weren't options, and maybe if they were given the options that we have today, I mean, it doesn't mean they would have, they're all saints and they would have just stuck on, So I think a lot of them would have changed jobs if they were given options. But in those days, I mean, you didn't change jobs. I mean, you were a clerk or you were an admin staff, and you basically worked your way up for 30 years in the company, and you stuck by the company, and the company stuck by you, because in those days there wasn't retrenchment and stuff like that. That's as well. True, yeah. So that idea of it was like a marriage line in the old days. I mean, you sort of stuck with one another, and I think we have to accept the fact that we are living in a different time. So again, I think we need to be realistic to say that it's not realistic to expect Gen Y and Gen Z to act in the same way as our grandparents, because, like I say, the world has changed, and they shouldn't, So at the same time, we are saying yes, they should toughen up. It's good to have a strong work ethic. I mean, at any sign of challenge, it doesn't mean you leave, you bail out. You need to toughen up. The resilience needs to be there. But at the same time, it's not a bad thing that, as a younger generation, you've got options. So, of course, if you're in an environment that is abusive, where you've got bosses or organizations that are really, literally abusing you. So that's different. That's no longer challenge anymore. That's just downright abusive. I mean, that's slave labor kind of stuff.
Right.
Underpaying, overworking, and so I think in a genuinely difficult environment where you're not happy and you've given it a go for a couple of months, 2, 3, 4 months, but it's apparent that no matter what you try, you're just unhappy there. I mean, we are not saying, soldier on. We're saying, look, there are options available. It's important that, you find that 60-40 balance. So I mean, of course, if it's 10-90 and you're miserable 90% of the time, then I think 3 of us are certainly, the message we're not sending is, hey, just soldier on and suck it up. And I mean, in 3-4 years time, after you've fallen into deep dark despair and sort of jump off the bridge, I mean, so obviously we're saying you need to be honest with yourself. And if this is not working out, you do live in a world where there are options, and it's okay to explore options, and it's important, because that's the reason why, to me, the competition is good and important. The fact that things are transparent, that you can read, employees, just like TripAdvisor, the employee versions of that, where you can give feedback, means that abusive employers can't hide anymore, and that's a good thing, So on the other hand of the ledger, I mean, we are talking about employees being, less, maybe less entitled, toughen up. But at the same time, employees also need to wake up to the fact that, just like hotel managers or restaurant owners, you can't hide anymore. If you're offering bad service, if you're offering a bad environment, a toxic environment, if you may, people will know. I mean, people will find out. You can't hide anymore, and that's a good thing.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do some quick questions from the team.
Excellent.
Okay. So, let me see some of this. Okay. Actually, this is quite an interesting question. So Danny has a question. Danny is actually the lead sales and marketing guy. We've experienced a recent job where a Japanese company actually assessed who will get the job by assessing the mental health condition of that agency. So it actually didn't really matter if you had the best idea. They wanted to know if that agency was actually doing well, like mentally, and that's an interesting twist actually. All right, so
I think that's smart. I think that's very innovative because you see, as you know, a lot of agencies, the turnover rate is very, very high. So I mean, you give them the job, after 6 months, the people servicing you are no longer the same, and people don't like that. So I think by assessing mental health, stability, job engagement, actually that's a very smart way to say, look, I just want to make sure I'm working with a stable organization where people are happy to be there, and I think that's good.
Okay, I'm going to try and paraphrase Danny's question. Okay, Danny is asking from a point of, let's say you are a leader, all right? When you are working with people under you, what are some key indications, like how do you deal with, I guess, how do you know if and how do you help if the people working under you have an issue with mental health? Like, what are some telltale signs that pop up? Or like, because formally in a company, yes, the only thing you can do is, hey, go take a break. Take some leave, so on and so forth. I'm also like, I guess to chime in, how would you be more sensitive to the workplace environment if you're in a key role to know that your team is undergoing this kind of thing mentally?
Well, I mean, okay, let me approach that question in two ways. I think number one, there are occasions where when somebody is going through mental health issues, so whether it's acute stress, mental breakdown, maybe even depression, that the team or the bosses even may see some telltale signs. Sometimes, sometimes you see signs, their appearance, how they're behaving, erratic speech, you see a sudden change in their personality. So they didn't used to be like that, but there's a sudden shift. And these are sort of all red flags and danger signs, right? But I want to also say that there are a lot of occasions where you don't see the warning signs. And that's why, there are a lot of workplaces where true tragedies will happen. So whether it's a suicide that happens because of depression, and then everybody sort of the morning after all looking around saying, but I mean, did you see anything? We didn't see any signs. I mean, he seemed to be happy. He was just joking around. He was, in happy hour with his last night, and then this happens. So I think at the same time, there are many occasions where people keep their mental health issues very well hidden. Right. So whether it's depression or whether it's self-harming or whether it's an eating disorder or whether, something like that. So I think it's important to also understand that. And therefore, one of the key things we tell employers is to say, how do we create an environment in your organization where employees feel a bit more freer if they are going through, whether it's a difficult time or personal problem or family problem or mental health issue. They feel brave enough and courageous enough to be able to approach you or somebody, one of their direct lines, managers, leaders, because in this company, we don't punish people who may be going through a difficult time. So I think that's a major part of that question. How do you create an environment where people don't feel scared to reveal it? Because if they feel scared to reveal it, because every time, they show a sign of weakness, they're sidelined. They are immediately put on cold storage. All of the major projects are taken off them because nobody trusts them anymore. So if that's an environment, then of course everybody's going to be really good at pretending, to be strong. So I think it's about an environment that allows vulnerability. That says, hey, look, if you're going through a tough time and all of that, that's fine. We help you through it, and we find as a work culture, we find ways to actually help you deal with it rather than, we throw you under the bus kind of thing.
I'm going to try to, we're going to try and breeze through some questions.
Sure.
All right.
That's good.
I want to, there are some questions that have to do with, I would think a big question would be, should I stay or should I go? It's under that theme, right? Okay. A lot of questions that, the team are like, Brian is being very nice and doing anonymous questions. Thanks, Brian. We're just gonna go through anonymous questions.
That's good.
I'm gonna try and compile them together because I think because we've had the benefit of
who would like to go? Put up your hand right now.
We've had the benefit of like not working in a quote unquote corporate structure. So our real world assessment to what's happening out there is a bit different.
Sure.
But I think this is something that anyone could, anyone could experience. Okay. I'm going to try to paraphrase again, but I might just read it. Okay. So I enjoy working.
Okay.
I enjoy the team, colleagues.
Yep.
But what if the employers can't provide the salary or benefits that I think I should be getting?
Sure.
Is this asking too much? Or should I consider leaving for financial reasons versus great people and growth opportunities?
And I think, look, okay, it's a really difficult question to ask, but maybe I guide them in this way, right?
Okay.
I think it starts off with then knowing what is really important to you in your life, right? So one of the things now I'm with university students, even actually with younger kids, when we start talking about career guidance, we say, look, before you talk about jobs and what career you want to do and studying and all that, take a step back. The more fundamental question all of us need to ask ourselves is actually, what do you want in life?
Yeah, what makes you happy?
All right, so what makes you happy? And I think the way we answer that question then informs the answer to this question. So there's no right or wrong one. Look, I mean, one way I could answer it is to say, look, I've set certain targets for myself in my life. For example, I'm just making this up, by the way. So for example, person A may say, look, I want to travel in my life. So I've made it very clear that by the age of 35, I want to travel the whole wide world, and that's going to make me happy.
Correct.
I'm very clear that that's my life goal.
Correct.
Now, to do that, I've come up with a budget of how much it will take to do this. So I need how many thousand ringgit or whatever it is of safe income, so that by 35, I want to be able to take 6 months off and travel the whole wide world. So I mean, fair enough. So somebody who answering that way may say, well, my current job doesn't give me this salary, so nothing wrong.
Goal.
I'm not blaming the organization. I mean, this line of work doesn't give me what I want, so I need to pick option C, D, or E for jobs or industries. I might have to change industry, that will give me this, because that's sort of their salary scale. And so I may not enjoy the job so much, but you see, the job may not be the major part of your life goal.
But it's the job, means to get to your life
exactly
goal.
So for some people, that's why I reject that passion argument, so some people say, look, you know what, the only job you should take in this life, the only guideline is choose your passion. And I say, look, you know what, sometimes that's the case. Sometimes you're fortunate enough where your passion and interest and talent and earning potential all come together, but that's coming from a very privileged position. You have to understand that's 1-2% of the world's population. The rest of us don't have such privilege, which means that you're gonna have to pick. So some people, to them, the job itself is not the life goal. That's not where they get their sense of fulfillment. It's about family. It's about traveling the world. It's about, I want to retire when I'm 35 and just go and live, and open up a farm somewhere, and that's it.
Wow.
So my point is, so be clear about what you want in life.
Correct.
And I think once that's clear, then a lot of other questions you're asking become clear.
You're right.
So I think a lot of people struggle when they've not got that fundamental question right. So that's why they're going through their whole life sort of a bit blur and under stress, because they don't really know what they want in life.
I think the best part of what you're talking about is it actually really goes back to the whole premise of why I think work counselors or psychologists do what they do. Most of the time, the questions that they ask isn't the problem. It's actually why are you asking the question, and it all comes back to, do you really know what you're looking for? Like, do you know either what you're looking for, or do you really know what you're going through? Because you're right. Just saying, if this was an anonymous question from our team, to be honest, I personally also feel that if, like, quote unquote, it would be very unfair as an employer to say that if your family is going through a tough time financially, logically, there is no way for me to give you special benefit to increase anything you're doing. I would, even if it was me, think of a way to figure that out. So does that have anything to do with your passion? No. Does that have anything to do with loving your colleagues? No. It is a situation that you're in. So I guess it does really depend on, do you know what you're looking for at any given time? All right, let's try and move on to the next one. I like this one because it has to do with the quote unquote passion. Okay. I feel stuck and stressed in my current job. Should I rethink what I'm doing and possibly change my career role? I want to highlight this because I have a lot of friends who give up really fast. They go in maybe for a month or 2 or 3. You know what? This job isn't for me. The minute they hit this first speed bump, right? But then I want to broaden the question a bit. Like, let's say this person has been stuck or stressed for, I don't know, no one gave me any sense of time frame
5 months,
here.
6 months, 1 year.
So I don't know who's the... But I do feel that more often than not these days, this question comes up very early. Should they rethink what they're doing and possibly change their role?
I mean, so I would say, yeah, you're right, Ming Han. I mean, give it at least 6 months to a year, you know. I mean, I think you need to give time for, you know, to really get a sense of a job, of an industry before I think we make judgments about, is this a good fit for me? And I think you're right. Sometimes we do react very quickly. Now, of course, having said that, you know, there's no real rule that fits all, because I can think of instances where very, very quickly we could find out that this job is not for me. You know what I mean? So we go in there and we're going, okay, look, you know, it doesn't meet any of my strengths and talents, and
why not?
Very quickly within a week.
It's even a bigger question.
Exactly. Why did you interview for the job in the first place? So
Okay.
sometimes we're not doing our research. But so I would say, like I mentioned before, I mean, using the 60-40 principle, you know, maybe use that as a guideline, but give yourself some time, because some of the things you're struggling in right now, it doesn't mean that this situation is static. You know, weaknesses that I'm going through now could be because I'm new to the job, I'm new to the organization. There is a learning curve, you know. So we always say that at the beginning, everybody struggles the majority of the time, because you're starting at the bottom. You know, you're learning a lot of things. So like you say, I think the risk sometimes is if whenever we hit the speed bumps, we give up. Chances are, I mean, you may go through the rest of your 30 years of your life and not find your so-called niche or passion, because you're not giving enough time to actually discover. You know, so you need to sort of walk through the path a little bit longer. So I would say 6 months to a year is probably the minimum before you're making judgments about, this is really not for me.
Again, expectation. Did you go into the job expecting no resistance at all? Because there's no growth that is comfortable, you know? Wow, okay. So,
but also, look, one more point, which is the idea that opportunities, I mean, you need to pay your dues, you know. So I think in most industries and organizations, with maybe a few exceptions, I mean, you're not going to get to the fun stuff or the exciting stuff, so to speak, I mean, until you go through, you know, quite a long time of learning curve. So whether it's accounting, you know, most accountants or chartered accountants talk about the first 3 years as almost like slave labor while they're making their chartered accountantship, and then, you know, they push through. I mean, same thing with teaching, same thing with education, same thing with business, same thing with a lot of things. Event management, media, you know, I mean, advertising. I mean, the first few years are tough. And I think that's why it's about going in and talking to mentors and leaders and advisors who have gone through that first 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and they can tell you, look, this is a normal curve. The first few years, this is what you expect. And I think good companies do that. Good companies, they will actually give you that guidance to say, you've got to look at the bigger picture. The first couple of years is going to be this. You're going to concentrate on this. You're going to build up your skills. It's going to be difficult, but it's still important, because without that foundation, you're not going to be able to, you know, push through. So it's about, I think, understanding the lie of the land for an industry. I mean, to use an analogy of hiking, right? So climbing up Kinabalu is different from Tahan, different from Gasing, different from Gunung Nuang. I mean, and usually a good guide will sit you down and say, okay, this is the 3-day expedition. This is what you expect on the first day, second day, third day. And I think when people have that longer idea of, okay, I get it. So I mean, the first 3 hours are going to be absolute hell. But I expect that already. That makes a huge difference.
That's right, I agree.
To be able to climb Gunung Tahan. If not, I mean, nobody is going to survive within the first 3-4 hours. You know, so just getting a sense of that.
You don't climb Kinabalu not knowing how much it's going to kill you.
Yes.
That's why I'm not going to climb Kinabalu. Okay, just know these things, right?
I think this is a good wrap up. We've been through everything from toxic, quote unquote, now we know, toxic mindsets, usually not from other people but ourselves, going into entitlements and passion, and I feel like we could have just kept on going, because this is barely scratching the surface on things. MingY, do you have any notes before we wrap it up?
I feel like a lot of the questions that we talked about, and a lot of, I guess, the situations that, you know, are unfavorable in our sort of perspective. I like the way that you presented it, that there's always, number one, there's the choice, right? And secondly, that I think a lot of these things that we're not happy with comes from, I feel like it's a perception projection kind of thing. Right, like ask ourselves what really is not making us happy, and then what can we do about it. I love the locus of control, and for everyone who's listening to this, I feel like there is it's a very good exercise for you to kind of think about what you can and can't do in your current situation, which will help you a lot, I feel, because, you know, sometimes you feel helpless, but then you realize actually you can do a lot of things.
Right. So, do you have any send-off notes to the fellow listeners?
no pain, no gain, man. So I mean, I think whatever pathway you choose in life, I mean,
it.
so look, we are not anti-passion or dreams or goals.
Yeah.
We're just saying that, I mean, to get to that good stuff, you have to understand whatever pathway you take. I mean, you go to any company in the world, any industry, there's going to be some pain involved, some challenge involved, and you just have to, I think, toughen up and be resilient and push through that.
That's true.
But having said that, like I say, if you're in a company that you've hated and it's driving you crazy, then
do something
I would
right.
say you're free to leave. You know?
Why are you there in the first place? Oh my gosh! Thank you so much, Dr. Goh, for this episode.
Thank you for being the most intellectual person ever in this room. In this
That
place.
sounds horrible, right? You know?
I mean, tag us, guys, if you are listening in to this, and if you want Dr. Goh come back, just tag us and do this. We'll do this again, and maybe we'll even dive in depth into passion and proper topics. You know, we're not trying to blaze things through. I hope you enjoy yourselves.
Thanks for listening. If you guys want more Table Talk, we've got a host of other videos and podcasts on our Spotify and YouTube. We'll see you in the next one. Have a great week. See ya.